Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching the Today I Found Our YouTube channel, and in the video today we're looking at the soldier who voluntarily became a prisoner in Auschwitz. So just before we get started with this one, I will say that there are a lot of foreign names in this one. If I do make any mispronunciations, I apologize in advance. So the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, and this was despite the best efforts of Captain Witold Pilecki and his fellow Polish soldiers. On November the 9th of that same year, Witold and Major Włodarkiewicz founded the Tajna Armia Polska, TAP, or Polish Secret Army, an underground organization that eventually became consolidated with other resistance forces into the Home Army. Not long after the formation of organized widespread Polish resistance, its members began hearing reports of the conditions within the newly constructed Auschwitz concentration camp put into operation in the spring of 1940. Those first reports originated with prisoners released from the camp and from civilians such as railroad employees and local residents. In order to cut through the very troubling rumors and figure out exactly what was going on there, Pilecki came up with a bold plan: become a prisoner at Auschwitz. With a little convincing, his superiors agreed to allow him to go. In order to protect his family after he was captured, he took on the alias of Tomasz Serafiński, much to the chagrin of the real Tomasz Serafiński, who was thought to be dead at the time, hence why his papers and identity were chosen, but he was actually not dead. Later, real Tomasz had some problems because of Pilecki using his papers and name. More on this in a bit. According to Eleonora Ostrowska, owner of an apartment Pilecki was at when he was taken, when a Nazi roundup began, a lepanka, where a city block would suddenly be closed off and most of the civilians inside would be rounded up and sent to slave labor camps, and sometimes even just mass executed on the spot, a member of the resistance came to help Pilecki hide. Instead, Ostrowska said, "Witold rejected those opportunities and didn't even try to hide in my flat." She reported that soon a German soldier knocked at the door and Pilecki whispered to her, "Report that I have fulfilled the order," and then opened the door and was taken by the soldier along with about 2,000 other Poles in Warsaw on September the 19th, 1940. Now, it is important to note here that he didn't really know if he'd be sent to Auschwitz at this point. As Dr. Daniel Palawoda noted of Pilecki's capture, since the AB Acticon and roundups were still going on, the Nazis could have tortured and executed him in occupied Warsaw's Pawiak, Mokotów, or any other Gestapo-run prison. They could also have taken him to Palmyra to murder him in the forest. At the very least, they could have sent him to a forced labor colony somewhere in Germany. While he was willingly surrendered with the hope of being sent to Auschwitz, Pilecki lamented the behavior of his fellow countrymen during the roundup. What really annoyed me the most was the passivity of this group of Poles. All those picked up were already showing signs of crowd psychology, the result being that our whole crowd behaved like a herd of passive sheep. A simple thought kept nagging me: stir up everyone and get this mass of people moving. As he had hoped, probably the only person to ever hope such a thing, he was sent to Auschwitz. He later described his experience upon arrival. "We gave everything away into bags, to which respective numbers were tied. Here, our hair of head and body were cut off, and we were slightly sprinkled by cold water. I got a blow to my jaw with a heavy rod. I spat out my 2 teeth. Bleeding began. From that moment, we became mere numbers. I wore that number, 4859. We were struck over the head not by SS rifle butts, but by something far greater. Our concepts of law and order and of what was normal. All those ideas to which we had become accustomed on this earth were given a brutal kicking." Pilecki also noted that one of the first indications that he observed that Auschwitz was not just a normal prison camp was the lack of food given to prisoners. In his estimates, the rations given to prisoners were calculated in such a way that people could live for 6 weeks. He also noted that a guard at the camp told him, "Whoever will live longer, it means he steals." Assessing the conditions inside Auschwitz was only part of Pilecki's mission. He also took on responsibility for organizing a resistance force within the camp. This was called the Związek Organizacji Wojskowej, or ZOW. I'm screwing the pronunciation up on that for sure. The goals of ZOW included improving inmate morale. They also distributed any extra food and clothing, set up an intelligence network within the camp, and trained prisoners to eventually rise up against their guards and liberate Auschwitz. Ensuring the secrecy of the ZOW led Pilecki to create cells within the organization. He trusted the leaders of each cell to withstand interrogation by the guards, but even so, each leader only knew the names of the handful of people under his command. This limited the risk to the entire organization should an informant tip off a guard or if a member was caught. Pilecki's first reports to the Polish government and allied forces left the camp with released prisoners, but when releases became less common, passing reports onto the outside world largely depended on the success of prisoner escapes, such as one that occurred on June the 20th, 1942, where 4 Poles managed to dress up as members of the SS, weapons and all, and steal an SS car which they boldly drove to the main gate of the camp. A cobbled-together radio built over the course of 7 months, as parts could be acquired, was also used for a while in 1942 to transmit reports until one of our fellows' big mouth resulted in the Nazis learning of the radio, forcing the group to dismantle it before they were caught red-handed and executed. Palecký's reports were the first to mention the use of Zyklon B gas, a poisonous hydrogen cyanide gas, as well as gas chambers used at the camp. He saw the first use of Zyklon B gas in early September 1941 when the Nazis used it to kill 850 Soviet POWs and Poles in Block 11 of Auschwitz I. He also learned of the gas chambers at Auschwitz II, or Auschwitz-Birkenau, from other resistance members after construction of the camp began in October 1941. ZOW also managed to keep a pretty good running log of roughly the number of inmates being brought into the camp and the estimated number of deaths, noting at one point over 1,000 a day from the new transports were gassed. The corpses were burnt in the new crematoria. All of the reports were sent to the Polish government in exile in London, and they in turn forwarded the information to other Allied forces. However, on the whole, the Allies thought the reports of mass killing, starvation, brutal and systemic torture, gas chambers, medical experimentation were wildly exaggerated. It should be noted here that during Palecký's nearly 3 years there, several 100,000 people were killed at Auschwitz, and beyond the death and horrific tortures, countless others were experimented on in a variety of ways by individuals such as the Angel of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele. All total, it is estimated that somewhere between 1 to 1.5 million people were killed at the camp. Significant doubt surrounding the accuracy of his reports meant that Palecký's plan to bring about an uprising inside Auschwitz never came to fruition. Palecký had managed to convince his network of resistance fighters inside the camp that they could successfully take control for a short while and escape if the Allies and Polish undergrounds provided support. He had envisioned airdrops of weapons and possibly even Allied soldiers invading the camp. However, the Allies never had any intention of such an operation, and the local Polish resistance in Warsaw refused to attack due to the large number of German troops stationed nearby. The Nazi guards began systematically eliminating members of the ZOW resistance in 1943, and so, with his reports being ignored, Palecký decided he needed to plead his case in person for intervention in Auschwitz. After handing over leadership of ZOW to his top deputies, he and 2 others were assigned to the night shift at a bakery which was located outside of the camp's perimeter fence. At an opportune moment, on the night of the 26th, they managed to overpower a guard and cut the phone lines. The 3 men then made a run for it out of the back of the bakery. As they ran, Palecký stated, "Shots were fired behind us. How fast we were running, it is hard to describe. We were tearing the air into rags by quick movements of our hands." It should be noted here that anyone caught helping an Auschwitz escapee would be killed along with the escaped prisoner, something the local populace knew well. Further, the 40 square kilometers around Auschwitz were extremely heavily patrolled, and the escapees' shaved heads, tattered clothes, and gaunt appearance would give them away in a second to anyone who saw them. Despite this, all 3 not only survived the initial escape, but managed to get to safety without being recaptured. Unfortunately, Palecký's plan to garner support for liberating Auschwitz never materialized. After arriving at the headquarters of the Home Army on August the 25th, 1943, and desperately pleading his case for the Home Army to put all efforts into liberating Auschwitz, he left feeling bitter and disappointed when the idea was discarded as being too risky. In his final report on Auschwitz, he mentioned in his report his superiors' cowardliness. After this, Palecký continued to fight for the Home Army, as well as trying to aid ZOW in any way he could from the outside. He also played a part in the Warsaw Uprising that began in August of 1944, during which he was captured by German troops in October of that year and spent the rest of World War II as a POW. Palecký wrote his final version of the report on Auschwitz, later published in a book titled The Auschwitz Volunteer Beyond Bravery, after the war, while spending time in Italy under the Second Polish Corps, before being ordered back to Poland by General Władysław Anders to gather intelligence on communist activities in Poland. You see, the invading Germans had already been replaced by another occupying power, the Soviet-backed Polish Committee of National Liberation. This was a puppet provincial government set up on July the 22nd, 1944, in opposition to the Polish government in exile, the latter of which was supported by the majority of Polish people and the West. During his 2 years at this post, he managed to, among other things, gather documented proof that the voting results of the People's Referendum of 1946 were heavily falsified by the communists. Unfortunately, there was little the Polish government in exile could do. Even when his cover was blown in July of 1946, Palecký soldiered on and refused to leave the country, continuing his work collecting documented evidence of the many atrocities against the Polish people being committed by the Soviets and their puppet government in Poland. For this, he was ultimately arrested on May the 7th, 1947 by the Ministry of Public Security. He was extensively tortured for many months after, including having his fingernails ripped off and his ribs and nose broken. He later told his wife of his life in this particular prison. Auschwitz compared with them was just a trifle. Finally, he was given a show trial. When fellow survivors of Auschwitz pled with the then Prime Minister of Poland, a survivor of Auschwitz and a member of the resistance in the prison himself, for the release of Pilecki, instead he went the other way and wrote to the judge, telling him to throw out record of Pilecki's time as a prisoner at Auschwitz. This was a key piece of evidence in Pilecki's favor, given one of the things he was being accused of was being a German collaborator during the war. And so it was, as part of a government crackdown on former members of the Home Army resistance, Pilecki was convicted of being a German collaborator and a spy for the West. This was among many other charges, which ultimately got him the death sentence via gunshot to the head. This sentence was ultimately carried out on May 25th, 1948 by Sergeant Piotr Smetensky, the butcher of Mokotów prison. From then on, mention of Pilecki's name and his numerous historic acts were censored in Poland, something that wasn't changed until 1989 when the communist Polish government was finally overthrown. Witold Pilecki's last known words were reportedly, "Long live free Poland." Now, you might think at this point that it's strange that Pilecki frequently and quite willingly threw himself into incredibly dangerous situations, despite the fact that he had a wife and kids back home. Polish actor Marek Probos, who studied Pilecki extensively before portraying him in The Death of Captain Pilecki, stated of this, "Human beings were the most precious thing for Pilecki, and especially those who were oppressed. He would do anything to liberate them, to help them." Mirroring this, Pilecki's son later said his father would write that we should live worthwhile lives, to respect others and nature. He wrote to my sister to watch out for every little ladybug, to not step on it, but place it instead on a leaf because everything has been created for a reason. Love nature. He instructed us like this in his letters. It wasn't just his children he taught to respect life at all levels. 2 years after Pilecki was executed, and at a time when his family was struggling because of it, a man approached Pilecki's teenage son and stated, "I was in prison as a guard with your father. I want to help you because your father was a saint. Under his influence, I changed my life. I do not harm anyone anymore." And now for some bonus facts. As we mentioned, the real Tomasz Serafiński was not dead, as Pilecki had thought, when he took his papers and assumed his identity. After his escape from Auschwitz, the real Tomasz was arrested on December 25th, 1943 for having escaped from Auschwitz. He was then investigated for a few weeks, including a pretty brutal amount of strong-arming, but was finally released on January 14th, 1944, when it was determined that he was not, in fact, the same individual who had escaped from Auschwitz. Afterwards, Pilecki and Tomasz actually became friends, and although Pilecki was killed, according to Jacek Pawlowicz, that friendship is alive today because Andrzej Pilecki visits their family and is very welcome there. In the early 2000s, certain surviving officials who were involved in Pilecki's trial, including the prosecutor Czesław Lipinski, were put on charges for being accomplices to the murder of Witold Pilecki. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, if you're looking for something else to watch, some more of our videos are on the screen over to the right, so just click on one of those to go and explore some content we made in the past. I hope you enjoy them, and thank you for watching.